Finally, we are live. That was a nightmare.
Yay!
Sorry for the delay. For some reason, the streaming service just said, "Yeah, we're not doing it right now at 7 o'clock." We had other
Right.
plans, so it
It's
took us a little
no.
bit. I think we're up now. Everything's looks like everything's playing on the other side, so I think we are good to start. No, Chris, while you check out the Twitch side, let me go ahead and introduce everybody. How's it going, everybody? My name is DuShaun Williams. I'm here with my co-host Chris the Moncada. I don't know why I tried to put
How's
an
it going?
E with your M, but Chris Moncada is here with me today, and there's another episode of Gaming Over 30. Chris, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What was your first indie game?
Ooh, that's a really hard question. Let's see.
Here, let me follow up with another one before you answer. When
Go
were
for
you
it.
first able to tell the difference between different indie games? Like you were playing a AAA and you were playing an indie game. What was that discerning factor for you?
Uh, it probably had to be with what are those things called? Like I know we talked about earlier for the SNES, like that 7-Up game I played.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was one of those ones where it's like, this seems a little bit different, or I don't know if it would be indie at the time though, because I think it was by Acclaim, like the Clay Fighters game,
Yeah,
things like that. I know for sure. I know a lot of it once like the 360 era came along.
I think. Yeah, I want to say that. I think indie games were kind of more of a later fact. If there was an indie game in the Super Nintendo area, it would have got lost in the sea of all games that are kind of similar to it.
Yeah.
Honestly, half of that I think is because indie games so far, at least for me, how I ended up recognizing indie games was the difference between whether or not, am I watching or am I playing a game that's a platformer, or am I playing a game that's a platformer with extra steps? And, and I
Yeah.
know that's kind of weird to say it that way, but I think I really caught into indie stuff when we were first when really when they were coming to hit big platforms. I think the first indie game that I've remember really fondly of that kind of got me in a lot of different directions was actually Shank. I'm not sure if you remember that game, but
Which was that one?
it was a kind of like a side kind of beat 'em up kind of platformer. It was really straightforward. You would just go around. You'd be basically cutting people, but you were doing it in a way that you're kind of playing like a side-scrolling fighting game, and
Gotcha.
it just had a really 2D feel to it. The animation wasn't completely drawn out, but it was really nice. The game was pretty nice. It was pretty fun, and most importantly, it was pretty short, which I think those are like the three characteristics of any indie game, at least around that time.
That's true.
So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today was really a indie games in general, but how did indie games change for us? Like what made indie games special? And I kind of want to hit it on two aspects. The first one, just as a gaming perspective, how we played them, how we really got into them, what are the ones that we've played the most, and kind of like in the game dev perspective, I kind of wanted to kind of touch in like how indie games actually affected game dev in general, especially with between that 2010 2020 kind of realm.
Uh, my biggest thing I think it was for like the 360 era and stuff like that, because
Like earlier.
SNES, yeah, SNES and 64, I probably couldn't remember a lot because it was mainly just a lot of like rare games and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until like the live arcade game became a really big thing, and you could get games for cheap and stuff like that. Like one of the most memorable ones that kind of changed my idea of indie games was Castle Crashers.
I remember playing it. It's just I don't know why. Like I have a big old blank about it, but that was another game that I remember pretty fondly. Oh, that's kind of pretty interesting on that one. What was it? And I know, how would I say it? Like there was a lot of bigger games around the time, and then I think it wasn't until later on where I think indie games started being pretty big for me. I think when you bring up the 360 time and all that, I think back then still was pretty hard to know what an indie game was. I think indie games weren't really a a broad kind of subject. Like the actual pocket of it was a broad subject. When someone made a video game, they were creating something that could potentially become bigger, right? Like it wasn't
Yeah,
something that small. And I think Minecraft is a very good example of that. A game that, that had a great concept. A lot of people jumped onto it before its version 1, and it just ended up something that just kind of was on everybody's computer at one point until like it started becoming so big. It's I think I look at games back then where it's like it didn't matter how small or big the idea was, everything kind of felt AAA to me back then.
yeah, that makes sense.
No, what's your opinion on that? I think it's for me it's there was a transition, but I think for me the transition was a little bit more how I recognize the type of genre of it rather than like, oh, I knew this was an indie studio or anything like that.
For me, it was just like a definitely like a shorter type of event, shorter type of game. Might be more of a 2D than a 3D aspect in its race. Especially like pixelated art becoming a thing back in the 360 era when everybody had switched to 3D models and stuff like that. It was like, okay, these games are like something different. You know what I mean? Because it's done with this type of art style, or like there's just something unique. Either it's a unique gameplay that's added to it, or the art style is something that's very unique that you don't usually see. Like pretty much when you see on TV for commercial stuff like that, like a Call of Duty, a Halo, you know what I mean, Last of Us, stuff like that. It was like, okay, this game has like a niche that's gonna hopefully get my attention, and that's when I noticed like this is a totally different kind of area of games that I wasn't used to, in a sense of being like, oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. I think that's a pretty good call out. Like this, the obvious difference in I don't want to say quality because I feel like when you say it like that, it kind of diminishes what was done for some indie games. I think it's just the fact that it just looked like it was scaled down a little bit. It's like, oh, hey, this is nice artwork, or this is pixel art, all the way, or this is all the other stuff, like stuff that was like they did it before because they had to, and now everybody doing it for an aesthetic. I think that was a good way of kind of noticing them.
Gotcha.
I think for me though, I think it was just the fact that indie games dominated like the platform kind of market. That it was kind of like it was hard for me to see most platforming side scrolling games that's not indie to a point
Really?
because it's like this you me and you grew up around Mario. We grew up with
Yeah.
like how Mario plays, and most Nintendo games back then had something like that where they might have added particular mechanic to it or something like that. But when you have games like Braid or whatever, that was like, oh yeah, it's different, but it tells a story in a very interesting way. It Yeah, the gameplay of it and kind of what you're realizing was kind of happening with the story was a very big deal. And it wasn't something that, oh, would this concept just sell to a general audience? It was something that I feel like was a little bit step above. And so after that, like when more and more side scrolling games came out, I always kind of just saw them as indie games because I think one of the ways that or reasons why is because most games, when people attempt their first game or attempt to kind of make their first game, normally goes to the platform of side scroller, if not a game that's kind of like a single screen, like Flappy Bird is kind of an example of that, where it's the game concept is really simple, it's really tight, there's not really anything to it, you're just trying to complete a level, versus that next level up will be a platformer kind of going, in some kind of direction right now. And I think that's kind of where I was kind of noticing, and I kind of fell into that trap too, because I know there are more indie games around that time. But I think the ones that kind of step out a little bit more, that even game companies or platformers and platforms, not platformers. See, I can't even get it out. Platforms were willing to push out were more like 2D and Rogue, really, because even for me, like Rogue type of 2D games still seem pretty platformish to me. Um, but that's just kind of like my one-sided view of it. I've kind of grown a little bit since then and kind of looked at a lot of different stuff, but I kind of like where gaming is right now when it comes to indie games, because I think they add a lot more value than they even did when they were first becoming bigger.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of think indie games have taken over my like taste for video games stuff like that. Like I'd rather much play like a new indie game that has like a weird perk to it, something different than playing your usual AAA game. Just because for some reason it just scratches like an itch that feels good inside. It's like I play this game, it's short, it's sweet. Like one of my favorite things I jumped into at the time was Greece, which I believe is like a French game and stuff like that, and it's about like going through the different stages of grief and stuff like that through death. But it's like very colorful. There's not very much like actual storytelling, a little bit of dialogue, and like the game itself just tells the entire story, and the colors change and everything, meaning different, like to have you get different feelings as you use this hero to be like a small kind of platformer game. And I was like, that's really really cool. And then another game that was for the 360 was, oh, I had it in my head earlier too. Oh, a Hidden in Plain Sight, which was a multiplayer game that the idea was literally you're hidden in plain sight. So you'd be like the spy and a group of like NPCs stuff like that, and then your friends could all jump on and play, and they would be part of it as well. And so one of them would be like a little, a little aim dial on the screen, and you move it, and the other person is like a ninja hiding with a bunch of NPCs, and you're only when the little aim is moving, there's light on the screen that's like super bright, and the other side behind it is dark. And even though everyone's looking at the same TV screen, like you find out who you are, and you can start killing people. And as they move the little aim around, once it gets to where the person was killed, then they die. So like as long as you're in the darkness, you can kill, move away, and when the aim gets there, the people die, and that's when like the person who's trying to find out who's the killer, you're like, oh, okay, you're just dead right here. So you gotta see, okay, I think this person was moving this way or this way, and like that was a really really cool thing. Like I've never played a game like this, and I've never done anything like that, and it was like a really really cool fun time. It was at least for a good 6 months to a year to be like every time the friends would come over and stuff like that, like, hey dude, let's play this game, this is a good time, we're gonna have a good couple hours with this.
See, that's probably another question to ask. What has been a good multiplayer indie game that you've played that you really liked?
For a while we this I think was Xbox One era, but it was a game called iDarb, and I think it came out free on like the gold live service, and it was pretty much it could be 1v1 or 2v2, and it was this little pixelated like basketball / soccer game mixed together, and you could go against each other, and it had a bunch of ridiculousness and stuff like that. Like if you scored 3 in a row, you would use like geography to like bounce it off the walls and like the pillars, stuff like that, and the other person could try to just get in front and block it. And like if you scored 3 in a row, it would do the whole NBA jam to you, be like, you're on fire, and you're literally on fire, so you're faster than the other player because you're dominating at that point, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a lot of cool things like that. And then it was just dumb like nonsense things that would like overhype you and get you all excited while you're beating up your friend in the game, because like you would score and you'd like make this awesome shot, and they would like do a replay and be all dramatic, and then like blow up the pixels and stuff like that for the goal, and then it'd be like, and it's like, oh, it's the fucking Catalina wine mixer, like taking that line from Step Brothers and stuff like that. Like it was just a moment of time at the perfect time that they came out with dumb things like that. And so you'd either play together or you could play online and stuff like that. So if my friend was at house and like, how do you do it? I could just play a couple of matches of iDarb, and we'd just be talking and laughing over how dumb that game was.
I guess that's one of the things. The reason why I ask you is because I know I played some multiplayer games, right? For indie, but I don't remember a lot of them.
No,
I think it's only because like I know with my group of friends, we weren't really hitting on them so hard as before. Kind of like how we were talking about some of the other conversation about like the older multiplayer games we used to play, like GoldenEye and stuff. And then kind of later on, I think I favored single player games a little too much, right? Like,
okay.
I think most of the time I think I played like multiplayer games. It's probably when I'm with your crew and we were over at your house kind of playing some of it. Cause I know we played some weird ass games over there that,
weird ass ones
that, I just wouldn't have been introduced to if it wasn't for somebody else. So I think that's kind of how it kind of goes around too. It's just indie games are also something that's really hard to discover though. It's really a lot of times it's word of mouth. It's whether it's
very much
has somebody tried it and have do they like yourself. Killer Queen is a pretty good example of that. Like I went to GDC. I want to say it's the 2019. It's when I went. I know that's the year I went, but it's either 2019 or 2016 when I went to GDC. And people were talking about this game like if it like settled disputes, like if they had anything that like, hey, we want you talking a lot of smack, I'll see you at the arcade, this kind
Yeah,
of thing. And they would have a version of it. It's like, I didn't even know this game was out, but almost everybody knew about it. Like it was like an inside joke that I was kind of played out of. And now you can get the game on like Switch. I actually played it at Cidercade here in Dallas, where they actually had the really big arcade machine for it with like screens and
yeah.
everything.
Well, that's how it originally started. Was an actual arcade.
Yeah, and I just never like. I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty. I mean, it's a pretty interesting. Like, I'm not like overjoyed. Like, it's not like the best thing ever, but
Yeah,
personally, it was just kind of like, oh, I didn't know that this was a thing, but someone else introduced it or someone was just talking about it. And I think that hype just kind of got me more interested in doing it. And I think that was one of the ways that indie games got around is how much hype could be built around it.
yeah. It's definitely been word of mouth for that for when it comes to indie games. And I think the thing that helped really blossom it was the live arcade, because they would pop them up and it would be like a sponsored thing in the front of your page as soon as you turn on the Xbox, especially when they had the Summer of Arcade. You're like, okay, I'll play this game. Like, that's how I found out about Castle Crashers. That's how I found out about Limbo and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
games like that, you're like, okay, this is very different, but I want to try this out. This seems really fun. And nowadays, I get a lot of my stuff through just following people in the gaming industry and stuff like that through Twitter. To be like, oh, this game is hype, blah blah blah. You should try it out, this and that. And a lot of streamers and stuff like that now help out with that. And like for me, it's right now I'm like obsessed with Cult of the Lamb. Like, I believe everybody should play that game. That game is like phenomenally so much fun right now.
Yeah, I actually heard some coworkers starting to play that game now. Started to look at it. Also, I think actually before I get to that point, yeah, I think so. Like some stuff about current indie games is kind of like a whole different kind of crazy thing all in itself, right?
Yeah,
But like I know you brought up like Limbo. Limbo was kind of like one of those games where it's like, platformer, side scrolling, and all that, but it had just such a different aesthetic. You're thinking like, oh, I'm just walking, yeah, it's dark, nothing's happening. And then next you get stabbed in the chest, and you're like, well, wait a minute. It's all like that doesn't happen in games like that. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, that's kind of what we're in for. What's one game that I really did like, and this is one of those like you can't really tell it's a indie game. You just kind of know because it was made in Unity, so you just assumed it was an indie game. What's the game that came out for Xbox One that now you can play on Switch? There's two versions of it. It's kind of a row. Let me. What is that game?
what are you doing it? What is
There, there's an owl in it. The main character was it's the game where like the forest died out and like you're trying to kind of help bring it back, but you have this big old owl chasing you. There we go, Ori, right? There we go. I don't know why it was just like I saw the picture in my head, but the name kept doing this. But yeah, Ori, like I really liked the first game. Like I really enjoyed it. There was a lot of stuff that carried with it. I didn't think it was too difficult, although if I gave it to my wife, she'd probably lost instantly in that game. But it was really nice. It was really well executed. And I haven't got a chance to play the second one yet. I just really haven't sat down and kind of put in the time for it. But I think I just do own it, like wrapped already. But it's just one of those games where like I really did like it. And I felt like it was a very high quality for it. But to me, those are one of those games where I felt like it's such a good quality that's hard to tell if it was an indie game or did it have some real good backing to it. I know it was one of the bigger games that came out for Xbox at the time when they were kind of introducing stuff and they're introducing like kind of helping game studios kind of put out their stuff on the platform and stuff. And technically PlayStation was doing it too. They have their own kind of program where, they will reach out to you, have some partnership and you had to get it out. But I know Xbox, I think, was pretty frontal with it at the time. And I think those are one of those games where like you tried it and you were like, oh, I'm glad I tried this one.
Yeah.
But I think it's because I had the stamp of approval of a platform and that kind of had me attempt it. I think it was on the side. I probably wouldn't have played it and it would have been a shame. But how would I say it? Like those are the type of games that I kind of like, that were just they were good and I spent time with it and I enjoyed it. And I think most indie games I do enjoy. I think once you actually start sitting and playing them, you start really enjoying them, especially if you could play them with friends.
Yeah. You just gotta find the type of indie games that are like your niche, that scratch that itch for you and stuff like that. And there's like a whole variety of them you could find out there. Like when it comes to the platforming aspect, another one that's like super near dear to my heart is Celeste. Like Celeste is such a tough platformer game, but it's fantastic. The story behind it's great. The art direction is just phenomenal, and the soundtrack. I listen to the soundtrack at least once a month, if maybe more and stuff like that, or at least a couple of the songs between the month and stuff like that, because it's just so good. And that was one of those games that like was also, it was free it was on gold, it was free, and I just saw Twitch streamers, YouTubers talking about it here and there. I was like, that looks really, really fun. I was like, it looks kind of hard. I don't know if I could do that. And then sure enough, sat down, played it, fell in love with it. Almost want to throw my controller at the wall a couple of times, but I would beat it. And now I think I play it almost every year now. Like at least once in a year, I just play it and go and beat the whole thing, because I just love that game so much.
I remember you were playing it because I remember you had a big conversation with me and to try it, and unfortunately to this day I still haven't tried it, but I know I own it. It's like I have it on Epic, I know I have it on Steam, I know I have it on probably PlayStation and Xbox.
It's everywhere.
And I just haven't played it, so big disservice to the game. But I do remember everybody was talking about it, everybody was kind of giving on it. Oh god, what other games? There's another one, and it's another platforming side scroll. There's another game that the main character was kind of like a half wolf. It was very 2D. I think it was on the PlayStation first. I just can't tell if it was PS4 or PS3. I think it was PS4 because it was a digitally downloaded game, and I just don't remember too many digitally downloaded games. I'll come back to it, but there's another game that I really did like, and I think I played it on the PS Vita or PSP, was Guacamelee.
Oh yeah, it's a good game. Yeah,
beat 'em up. I liked it because not only was it like a fun game, it had a nice aesthetic to it. It actually had a lot of like, I don't want to say pop culture, but a lot of like relevant kind of meme stuff that was kind of baked into the game. Like the game just felt really relevant, even though like the whole concept of the game was on a completely different playing field, right? It was just like, oh yeah, you're a luchador, you're doing all this crazy stuff, blah blah blah. Then you would see the Megusta face in the corner or whatever. Like it was just kind of like, yeah, maybe kind of out of place, but I mean that was cool. It was amazing. I really liked it.
Another one that was really, really fun to play, whether it was solo or with friends, was the Scott Pilgrim one.
Scott Pilgrim was fun, but you had to do it with friends.
Yeah,
you had to do it.
I like playing it by myself because I could do it too, but I would never beat it playing with myself because it's not as fun. So once you get a group of like 2 to 4 people, then it's just like you're off to the races. And you're gonna beat that game almost every time.
Yeah, no, but that was one game. I think when I played it by myself, it was like, oh, it's nice, but it doesn't feel that special, I guess. Hey, maybe that's weird to say that.
Did you play a lot of beat 'em up games like growing up?
I did. Like, I mean, yeah, Double Dragon, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like I think those games has always been fun because you had someone else. When it was just you, like man versus you, I think those games were fine. They're great, but they're not. How would I say it? I think hack and slash was more my thing. I think if you were to tell me, like, if it was me versus the world kind of thing, the first game that comes to mind is Dynasty Warriors. Like, literally just throwing in a map, chase it, looking at people. I'm coming for you and the entire army by myself. Like, those are the type of, like, kind of beat 'em up games. Hack and slash games that I really liked. But, of course, like, it's a Double Dragon, all those, like, way before that. But but I think there was like that break of like I haven't played it. I think what made Scott Pilgrim nice itself because of how it looked, just kind of
Yeah.
everything. And then I think I played it after the Scott Pilgrim movie, so
Okay.
I knew more about it when I did it that way. So it was just really like, oh, okay, I understand the hype. But I think it was like either the game or the comic book came out prior to it, but I didn't know about it. It was just like a random movie that we saw one day, and I was like, hey, this is actually a pretty good movie. So, but when there was a game, I was like, is this where it came from? I was like, oh, let me try it out. Oh, this is actually pretty cool. And it's like, okay, cool. Okay, I see what we're getting. It's just, but like I said, like outside of that, it's like, oh, I kind of already know what's happening. You do need to bounce off of someone else when you kind of play it.
Yeah, I can see that. You
Have
want to
played
switch?
Bastion?
I've played it. I've never beaten it. I've never done a lot of it.
I think that was one game that I really liked, kind of the journey of the game, just playing it. Even though that was, I think my first. Oh no, that's a lie. It's not my first like that type of like view game, but it was the first one where it's like you were really active in it, and then you kind of slowly got power ups and kind of worked with it, and there was a lot about it. I kind of liked it, but the aesthetic was just wonderful, like how it looked, how it played. But I didn't really catch on. I didn't catch on to Transistor as much from that same
Okay.
company.
Yeah.
I know Hades is kind of like the last one, and kind of like there's Hades has done really well.
That's a fantastic game. If you haven't played it, you should try
Yeah.
it out. Because you don't even have to beat it, but you could just like do a good few hours runs into it, and you realize this game's like something special.
Yeah, no, I have played some of it. Like that one, I would say I actually played that one on Game Pass on the Android phone because I was trying to like that. Like, oh, okay, this I could see a game like of turning on my phone and trying it out and stuff. That's pretty cool. But I guess I never got the Bastion feeling again, which I was kind of sad. I mean they're two completely different games. I did think I just hold Bastion to like its own regard as far of a game, but I really liked it. Bastion was a really good game around the time. Yeah, I'm pulling up some of the stuff on the side, and there was a lot of indie games that we played and tried out. Of course, Hollow Knight. You've tried out Hollow Knight.
Yeah, Hollow Knight's right up my alley in the Metroidvania type of games. I haven't actually beaten it though, because it was one of those issues where I started playing it, and the time I was playing it, I think I was doing something else. So I did like a couple of runs and then stopped playing for a while because it got busy. And I was like, when I was like, I gotta go back to it. I was like, oh, wait, I'm lost. I'm gonna have to reset this all over again. And so I just didn't go back.
Then those are hard because like I like that type of gameplay. Don't get me wrong. I like that type of gameplay of the poke dash, try to read your opponent's movements, kind of all that. I think the roguelike aspect kind of puts me off of like you can get so far, but there's like no save. You got to kind of revert, kind of go back, find some stuff, and like the exploration is part of the game, but at some point you're like, it's cool, it's a nice concept, but I wonder if I really want to go that far with it. Outside of that, play the game was wonderful. Like I really did enjoy like kind of fighting with it. I like kind of doing a lot of the different stuff, and the concept of everything around it was really nice. The game just looked fabulous. But like you said, I think time was kind of really the problem. Like it's one of those games where it felt like it was a little bit more investment that I had at the time that I was playing it, and so I will say like I would recommend it for people for sure, but it was just something that like one day I'll come back to it and I'll finally enjoy it for real.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my go-tos I need to beat. Like I need to beat Hades soon, and then I'll beat Cult of the Lamb, and then I want to jump to Hollow Knight because I've been having that itch for a Metroidvania game, and I want to just play ones I've played before again. I want something kind of newish.
I say Rogue, but yeah, it is Metrovania, right? It's more of a Metrovania title. What is one indie game that you played that doesn't really have combat?
The one I've lost a lot of hours into this game at night, especially because at the time I was working evenings, so I would get home and I wouldn't be ready to go to bed, and I was and it's Loop Hero. Loop Hero is just kind of just loops around. It auto creates a map every time you start the game, and it gives you cards that you can add to the map and stuff like that changes up and adds new monsters and different things like that. You also try to get resources to build out a town and stuff like that. And your character always starts off with like an axe or like some or maybe a sword. And as you go, it moves on its own. You run into the enemies that just randomly generate on the map, and then it goes into an automatic combat system. And all you're doing at that point is just making sure your character is strong enough to get through all these bad guys so they could get better armor, better resources, and then expand that map to try and get to the end, to the final boss of it. And then once you get to the final boss, if you can beat it, then you go back to the place, add new resources of that. If you lose, then you lose like half of your resources. And so at least you go back with stuff, but then there's other things where like it'll give you options where you can like leave out early. Oh yeah, because when you go all the way around, it starts the day again. And when you go to your campfire, you can end it right there and you'll leave with all your resources, but you don't get to go to the final boss. So you're always like, do I leave now and just take what I have now? Do I go try and go all the way and lose some of these resources that I probably need so I can build the blacksmith so I can start off with better armor, things like that. Like I would just put a podcast on one of my screens and the other screen I'd be playing a loop hero. And it was such a small, minimal game. It didn't take any, you know what I mean? It didn't take anything. It was hard. So easy to play.
You didn't need too much focus on it, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
What about for you?
Honestly, I don't have too many. That's why, I guess I'm kind of asking to kind of get some suggestions in a way, because I don't know too many games where I played where there is no combat, right? Or there, and sometimes when I mean like no combat, I mean like the object of the game is not to punch something in the face.
Yeah.
Like it's really kind of like, you want to play the storyline and you play. I think what was the other one? Like Strange, whatever. Was that one an indie game?
Which one?
God, I don't know why. It's like so I think some of these titles may be too long for me because, Ori's not really all that long, but I think a lot of these titles, like I'm trying to remember them, and it's like, oh, I never playing it, or at least I never experienced it, and I just can't remember what was happening right there. So again, I got that's two, and now I got to put in the bucket and kind of figure out later. But I want to ask you another question because before we kind of move on to the other half, what do you feel like makes up a good indie game for you? Like, what are the criteria that you use now to actually, pick up an indie game? Is it hype that really kind of gets you, or is it it's this type of genre game? So you're like, oh, I like that genre game, I'll give it a shot. What are the things?
For me, it's a game that has to have some type of loop that's gonna want me to keep playing it, or it's like give me those things like, ooh, I just opened this up and I got this. Ooh, nice. Now I could go back and use this and stuff like that and try it out. And it's like, ooh, now I got this. Now I could go and use that. And so like when it comes to indie games, I like a lot of them like that, where it may be resource based, it may be simply just like going to the next level, and just the gameplay itself. It's just that gives you that type of feeling for me and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course, like going back to, since like we grew up with the Nintendo and stuff like that, it's nice to like have the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game that came out, which is like an homage to the arcade beat 'em ups and stuff like that. And it's like I grew up with those. I still love those to this day. So it's been fun to play like those games. I played Streets of Rage 4 and that game with my son and stuff like that. And it's like, so he gets to experience them as well. And you like seeing the joy of how much he's enjoying it, which is as much as I'm enjoying it. It's also like one of these like, oh, I gotta check this game out because I can play it with my son and stuff like that, and his friends or my friends. I remember one time my friends and we pulled an all-nighter playing Battletoads because we were like all hanging out, and then we were just like, oh, I was like, oh, we have it. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, oh, let's play it. It's like, cool. So we just had to play it. Ended up staying up all night, and this is a couple years ago, so we're already in our 30s, and so there's like 3 grown men in their 30s stayed up all night playing a game. Like that's not common anymore. It was when we were younger and stuff like that. So it really hit that spot of like kind of feeling that nostalgia, but new at the same time. And so I was like, oh, this is nice.
Okay.
What about for you?
For me, I will admit that I would say probably 30% of it is hype. Like if no one's talking about it, it's really hard for me to kind of get into it. Like I don't go down into my Steam library and see what's in there to pull out. It's too big, and B, it's just like Like it has to be something special. It has to be something that some people already tried. I think another 30% of that is genre. Like, is it the type of game that I would play if it wasn't indie? So RPGs, I'll probably give it a shot. One thing I like about indie games is they don't really take a lot of your time.
Hmm.
So it's nice to try to play something that I might be able to get through it. That's kind of like a big. That's why I'm kind of thinking about Stray right now and trying that out because everybody said that probably 5 hours max you need to beat that game and stuff, and that kind of gets me more to want to try it out. And everybody's AS hype, everybody's playing it, everybody's liking Catch Me Out or whatever, and it's not
Watching the cats go
something.
crazy or dogs go crazy.
Yeah, and it's not something I got to sink some time to it. So it's like, do I play Stray and get a game experience out of it and try it out, and hopefully I might like it too. And 5 hours is fine. I can spend 5 hours on the video game. Like got 2,000 on Epic 7. Um, or like, do I play like Spider-Man Miles Morales, which I know there's gonna be a tons of laundry list things I gotta do. I'll enjoy the story more, but I mean it's gonna take me a while. I gotta actually experience the story. And it's just gonna be nothing else is probably gonna happen around that time. Like I can't just play that and then let me take a break and play another game. It's one of
Yeah.
those like I know I'm going to be in it for the long haul. I'm already committing minimum 20 hours into the game to kind of get it done. I think though the last remaining 40% of that, um, outside just the hype, outside of the genre, it's whether or not it looks aesthetically pleasing to where
Yeah.
like I would love to play this by myself, or it's something that I can play with friends. I know we can bank some time into it. Um, I think Among Us is one of those where it's like the hype for it like went from zero to hero out of nowhere. Like the game has been out for a while, but then 4, 5 Twitch streamers play it, and now everybody's playing it. And it's getting awards. It's getting best multiplayer for the year. It's doing all kinds of stuff. That's all because it was so entertaining to watch other people lie to each other and then see if
Yeah.
people could figure it out. But there was so and I said I know it was really aesthetic and all that, but when I say aesthetic, it's not just the look, it's kind of the aesthetics of the gameplay itself. How simple but intuitive is the gameplay? How Among Us is a game where people have to do tasks, people have to blend in, and there's always somebody that has to be careful about what they do stuff, and they can't just go on a killing spree and be like, oh, let me hit that guy, and then like the guys in the room next to him and hit him too. No, it's like you got to kill one guy, you got to get out of there because you got to cool down anyway, so not much you can do about it. It's so simplistic that almost everybody can kind of grasp the concept, and as long as you have friends to play it with, the game experience skyrockets. Because trying to
Oh
play it
yeah.
by yourself, I've seen people try to do it, try to type and have conversations with each other. A, it's not that fun, and B, these fingers aren't typing that fast to have an argument. And so there's no way I do it like that. But like just the one time we played it, and I had terrible connectivity when it comes to playing this stuff. It was still very enjoyable to play with the boys. Like we were playing with your son too at the time and stuff. It was really nice. And I think once the aesthetics of gameplay really kicks in and you're just like, oh, this is fun, it's so simplistic but it's so genius at the same time. That's what kind of thing what really kind of gets me to really kind of play it and stuff. But it has to happen in those kind of like three categories. Somebody has to tell me, hey, this game exists, we're all playing it, maybe look at it. Has to be something all like, yeah, if it's not a shooter, I think I'm not even sure if there are any like indie shooters. Like if they are, I don't remember at all.
There's some, but they I don't know if any that are like huge. I think like maybe PUBG could be one that was like a huge one that blew up. H1Z1 was another one that would blew up, stuff like that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think those are third person too, though. But I have a special heart for third person shooters. But even then, it's like those games I haven't tried. I know all about them when they came out. They were super big. They're still technically really big,
Yeah.
but I have not downloaded any of them to like. I know I don't own a copy at all, and this because at the time that kind of gameplay, like I was kind of phased out of doing those kind of gameplays of going around shooting and let me get into a lobby of like 100 people and then see who's the last one left. Like I wasn't into it at the time, and I think so that was already 30 down, and then the other thing yeah, it's a nice those games are nice. Like Fortnite, I think itself is a very simplistic. It kind of adds some stuff to kind of have like the hype of what's going on kind of added to it, especially with like building and everything.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really like it didn't really captivate me to like give it that 40% that I really needed. But I think the one thing I liked about it was really just like the skins, how it was kind of evolving, how people were playing with it. But really, just only that 30% was pretty much left. Like I didn't have enough to really like, let me try it out. Maybe I might like it. But I think that might change later, because it's already like how many seasons is the game's in? At the, you
A
know,
million. You could be Goku now, man.
yeah. At some point, I need to try it. If anything, I like those, like the memes when all like the add anime characters and stuff, and everything they're showing with Goku and Vegeta and
Like
strapped and all that.
everything.
Those are hilarious to me, but still they got me to play the game though. It's just like fun to see and see how
It's cool.
the field goes out. Go for it.
I think you'll enjoy Fortnite playing with like friends. It is kind of in a series of like a Among Us type of thing feel where you're playing a game, especially now that they have the non-builder mode. But it's you're playing a game with like a couple of your friends, whether it's a duo or a trio, stuff like that, and it's just like your social area to hang out, and you maybe survive a match, maybe don't, and you're just shooting the shit, talking, hanging out, catching up, and stuff. And then if you're actually getting to the point where like there's only like 4 teams left, then you guys actually bunker down and start. Oh, okay, well this is all we have left. Let's go over here. Like you start actually getting more tactical into it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of that place where it's kind of like it's that social space where you go. Yeah, you're playing a game, but you're really just hanging out with everyone and talking. And I think that's where you'll have the best experience with it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's probably true too. I think playing with other people is really going to save that. What was one thing? Actually, I think maybe probably pause on that. Maybe we can go to the second half now. I just want to ask you those last things because I think it's relevant to what we're going to talk about next, and that is kind of like the game dev side of it. What has indie games done for like making games in general? Because to me, I felt like making indie games when they started becoming really popular for the general really helped people want to do game dev, right?
Yeah,
Like my first actual published game was a Flappy Bird clone. And
I remember playing it.
it's like it wasn't much. I wasn't going out to change the meta of how Flappy Bird goes. Everybody was kind of doing it. But it was my first successfully completed game that I was able to put out on the market that people got to play, that I got feedback on. And it was amazing for someone who hasn't really developed a game to finally actually publish one. It's such a great feeling. And I think that feeling kind of spread out more and more to where now people are kind of doing the same thing. And I think that's where those really simplistic kind of styles come from. Um, I think if it wasn't for indie games, I'm not sure how many people will see it possible to make games. I know everybody has the grand of like, oh, if I just had everything in the world, I can make this grandiose game that everybody will play and buy. That kind of that's still around, but I think when people are now like looking at Unity and looking and at using Unreal and how accessible these two game engines are, you can download it and try something out, and there's active tools to really help you kind of kick off your prototype, see if your thought actually works out with yourself or with friends. I think that kind of having some outlet where that can go to, I think really kind of skyrocket game development as a whole, and had people not wait for big AAA companies to kind of make the game that they want for them. They kind of
Yeah,
saw an active thing. Now, game development is hard no matter what you do. Trying to make a game, at all is very hard. And trying to finish it even as the skeleton version of it is just not it's not the best easy. It really is. I think game development is one of the most disciplined things that you can ever do because it's really, can you keep all that motivation, that enthusiasm all the way out through the process, because you're not going to finish it in a month. It's just, unless you're starting really small, tic-tac-toe-ish kind of thing, you're not going to finish it in a month. So can you keep doing it?
On that note, another thing is like, is your game still going to be relevant by the time it comes out? Because unlike movies and music and stuff like that entertains people, those are done in like less than 6 months, most of the filming and stuff like that, then editing, and by the end of the year they're already out. Or you know what I mean, or that by next year they're already out, so they're relevant. And sometimes games can take up to 4 to 6 years, sometimes 7 years. You know what I mean? Even for just indie developers, because it's hard. It's hard to do and stuff like that. And there's times where people come out with games and might have been one of the biggest trends at the time, but 4 years later, when they already got their game out, it's not really a thing anymore. So it becomes more of a niche, and then it just doesn't make it out there, which is really sad. The one thing I do actually believe indie development has done for games in general is it's the space where game developers are trying something new for gaming, and it's either a hit or miss thing. Because when it comes to AAA aspects, a lot of it's kind of like cookie cutter. This will make us a lot of money, then let's make a sequel of it, and then let's iterate on that sequel, and then another company will copy that exact same thing, just change their version of it and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And then when it comes to indies, like, they're all over the place. Like Stray is a perfect example. Hey, you're gonna play as a actual cat in this world and stuff like that, and we're gonna tell you a story in that way as a cat. You're not really fighting. You're not a ninja cat. You're not. You know what I mean? Things like that. You're not the cat with Assassin's Creed hood on, jumping on the top, coming down.
Yeah.
You're just a cat.
I think and I think you actually brought up a really good point too. I think talking about reskinning, when a big game comes out and it blows up, and then you see the Russian market of games similar to it, just different skin or whatever, but it's the same game, right? It's well, all intents purposes, like they might add maybe something else to it, and of course they can't really have it look exactly the same. But I think Fall Guys right now has some pretty viable clones to it. I think are really good. But I know, like, when Unity was kind of coming out and the asset store for Unity, being able to get the thing that most programmers just couldn't do was art and kind of getting assets and stuff for the game to try out. When people just, oh, let me just take this asset of this base skeleton game, change the colors and put it out. There you go. I made a game. Some of that's kind of hard. I won't like cheap it out.
Yeah.
Taking somebody else's work and trying to figure out how it actually works is a skill in itself. But it does kind of come up with those games that are kind of like just, a copy of it, or they did it because the fad right now is that type of game and everybody wants to play it, but not everybody can play it at the moment. So an alternative comes around to save the day or something like that. So
Yeah.
what was it? So I think one of the things, do you actively like go out and play kind of games as they come out, or do stuff like itch.io, just kind of play a game that somebody made?
I usually go for it usually bounce about like some influencer will talk about a game, or I read an article about like a game that maybe came out like 2 years ago, but they're like, oh, this article, it's like it's an op-ed where it's like, oh, this game meant a lot to me and stuff like that. Like that's how and from my son, that's how I got into Undertale. It was a thing I knew about for a long time, stuff like that, and I was like, that sounds like my game, I should play it. And like in 2017, I actually played it for a little bit, but I just never beat it. I just lost interest. And then my son got a little bit older, and then he beat it, and he was like, you need to play it, it's so good, this and that. And I was like, I know it's good, no, I'll play it, I swear. And then finally, I think it was this year. It was this year. I sat down, I played it, I beat it all through and everything, and it was just like, that was from my son like influencing me, as well as like an op-ed I had read on a game news site that they actually wrote it, and I played it, and I was like, oh man, like this is fantastic, this is an amazing game. The other one has been a Doki Doki Literature Club.
Don't even talk to me about that game. Oh, Jesus, that game.
But that was also from the influence of like the horror game scene and stuff like that. Because I love horror games, but it's always hard to find good ones, and it looks like the only space you're finding good horror games right now is in the indie scene. You know what I mean? So it's like, so I found out about that. I never played it, but I want to. But like Phasmophobia is another one, but that's more of a multiplayer game to play with people and stuff like that. And so seeing all that stuff is like, it's really really cool to be able to actually access it and play it because um before the 360 era and stuff like that, like you kind of had your games that were I guess for indies over that, but there was like that double A version of games, and then that died down, and indies has kind of become that double A spot now.
Yeah,
I feel.
you actually said a lot of big points right now. I think let me work my way backwards on it because scary games, just kind of like the media, like horror media in itself. I feel like when we were younger, I think we probably got scared of our own shadows if it was dark enough, and
Sometimes I still do. Like,
and I think
that's me.
everybody was kind of like that, right? But now, when you kind of think about it, like scary games or scary movies, they kind of lost a lot of appeal because the main point is they're not really all that scary. Sometimes it's like you kind of see where everything's going. The goal is to try to get you some thing, and then they normally just kind of result to jump scaring a lot.
Yeah.
And so I think indie games was the only place where horror games really could exist. And because it's not a game that you can really give to everybody either, at least a genre type. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think I'm not sure. You as a parent, you probably know more than me, but I'm not sure how many will let their 6 to 12-year-old play something that could give anybody nightmares and stuff like that. But I think that also gives them a chance to do stuff really well. I think it gives a chance to see like how can we do so, like Slender Man was one, how can we just kind of get a
Yeah.
game like, yeah, maybe it wasn't all that scary, but the aspect of like you're trying to accomplish something and something's chasing you around this world or whatever, while you're trying to do this kind of adds stakes to the game. And I think
Yeah. Definitely.
when there's like actual stakes to the game, I think it's when it starts getting kind of get fun in that aspect. But I think that was a good call out because yeah, I think now where horror games are, they're kind of into like the whole like, well, how do we bring our classic villains and monsters and stuff and repurpose them in a different way? And I think that's where it is right now, which I get it. I think it's nice. I'm just not sure if it's exciting, but I just don't see too much of AAA really touching on like scary games. Like maybe gothic type of games, like dark aesthetics and stuff like that. But even then, that's kind of few of none, right?
Yeah.
They're not really a big thing.
At the moment, when it comes to AAA, the only thing I really see is Resident Evil had its resurgence with 7 and like the remakes that they've been doing. And those are the ones that like I can see really been taken off and everybody talks about and stuff like that. But I don't see any other big AAA games that you see out there. You see smaller ones like Dead by Daylight's one that's still to this day going strong, and that's a smaller indie title that became huge and stuff like that. And you can see the aspect why of how they use the multiplayer and the idea of, oh, this bad guy's going to chase you, normal person. You have these tasks to do to try and get out and work as a team and see how you can get out. And then they started getting all the licensings for the actual horror stuff and stuff like that. You had like, I played one and I was playing, which is really, really weird. My son and his friends really got into that game for a while. And I was like, all right. I was like, it's his game. It's like, I watch horror movies all the time, so he's around and stuff like that. I was like, as long as you know it's fake and this and that, we'll be okay about it. And like, I played with them and I got the skin to be a Pyramid Head. And so whenever it was my turn out of the rotation to be the horror figure, I would choose a pyramid figure, and they would be like, "Oh, that's not fair." It's like we just get like the lame ones, this and that. It's like, well, I have a job. I don't know what to tell you. So I'm gonna choose this character I want.
Yeah. Money makes everything fun. And honestly, I think the second thing that you hit on, I'm trying to remember the point now, but it kind of reminded me of and it was with Undertale. When Undertale came out, and I went to GDC that year, either that year or the following year, because I think the game that come out and then the rewards are for the games of the previous year, before March. And I just remember that game literally stealing awards. Like there was Journey was another game, another indie game
Hmm.
that like everybody loved. That was just like, oh, they stay. That's a game where there's no combat right in there. It's just like, but everybody loved to just play it. Let's just experience it. But I just remember Undertale just literally taking the rewards out of people's pockets. It was just kind of like it was a different game. You had the option to not be the aggressive player. You had the option of, they kind of gave you a real choice at the end of it, like everything that you did. And it's not to spoil it too much, obviously, and not to say because I haven't played the whole game, but just from everything about it, it's just kind of one of those things where it's such a big change in how a simple concept gets executed really well, and that
Yeah,
whole 40% of the aesthetic of the gameplay. And how was it? How would I would say it? Those are kind of for me who wants to do game dev, who tries to do a little bit on the side and tries to do all that. Indie games is what kind of gives me hope to try because
yeah,
I don't imagine myself doing the next AAA game, at least not anymore. I think the ideas and stuff that I had would have been nice, blah blah blah. But I think now what kind of makes indie games kind of really special for me is if you try, you will succeed, but you have to keep trying. It's really all on you. You got to put in your aspect and get to a point. And two, it is possible. It's your idea may not be as far fetched once you actually put it as a prototype or talk about it with other people, stuff like that. But it is fun. It's one thing I like and kind of like the job of why I like being a software engineer is I like creating things. Kind of like this, the lights, kind of even like the equipment and stuff like this. Like I use this mic for meetings at work, and it's because I like playing around things. I like trying to create things, whatever might be the case. Just love creating stuff. And I think game dev, one thing I like about game dev is because you can use a lot of different techniques to do one big project, and sometimes it's necessary. Even if you can't do it, you could always Fiverr it or something like that. But
yeah,
the journey of trying to learn how to do it yourself is also just as fun. Being able to create your own little music lyric, like you don't need to do like Beethoven piece or a Zimmer, Hans Zimmer piece or
yeah,
anything like that. It's like you can do what they did when they were first coming out with games like Mega Man and all that. You just kind of get a riff that really sells the aesthetic of your game. And I like go to GDC because GDC helps remind me, reaffirm those kind of experiences of all like, oh, I love this feeling. I want to one day have, my project even be considered to be other, not even win, just be like a certain amount of people played it enough to where like they really enjoyed it and stuff. And
yeah.
that does kind of give me hope when you're kind of like in that space of stuff. Like it's just that motivation is really good. I'm not sure if you yourself has ever wanted to make a game, or where was there a point at one point where you're like, I might try it out one day. What about tell me?
I had thought about it at one point, but it's not. I think it's not my thing. I like playing them more than trying to develop them and stuff like that. Like I give like the utmost respect for developers because that is a very tough job. Like a lot of people, and that's kind of one of the sad things about our like us being gamers and stuff like that is that like so many devs get like shit on and stuff like that because there's glitches and stuff like that in the game and stuff like that. It's like, yo, making these games aren't easy, especially when like it's one person making it, two people making it. Sometimes they were lucky enough to strike gold and they're trying to do their best. Like Among Us is one of those ones where it was became huge and stuff like that, and all of a sudden they needed to outsource because they didn't have enough people to patch things up, stuff like that, for how crazy and how big it was getting. You know what I mean? And so like there would be people like on comments and stuff like that, and unfortunately like yelling at them. And it's like, well, like put yourself in your shoes. Like if you were that person, what would you do? How could you do it? You know what I mean? It's not
Mhm.
easy, even at your normal job that you're doing and stuff like that. When you have like other people yelling at you for things like that, it's the same thing. It's like, so there's no reason to go attack them and stuff like that because like it's probably one of the hardest jobs I could think on the planet in my mind. and but it's like one of the most popular ones too at the same time.
I think it's really hard nowadays is because social media is just so big and people's voices themselves travel so far. And really like you could say like, well, if they're not building a game, what do they know? You could say that if you want, but realistically, it's hard to fend off 1,000 people like bashing you. It really
Yeah.
is. If the 1,000 people came up to your school and you were at and all just pointed at you, start saying stuff, you probably crack down a little bit. Like it would probably get to you. But so to see it on your phone or to see something that you put your heart and sweat and blood and tears in,
Hmm.
that it's very hard. And I think that's not stated enough in a lot of cases. I Game dev is very hard. Like you said, it's a very hard thing, and it takes a lot of dedication, discipline, and to really even kind of get it halfway done, let alone like actually finish it. But then one of the things that I really do like is watching a lot of YouTubers actually work on their dev work projects. Danny was one of them for his game that it's almost a meme at this point of when he'll finish it, and it's kind of grown out. He's been able to make even smaller games that have been really nice and really well received, to like Pontypants, who's making an Unreal game right now that's just like a funny boxing game, and just kind of documenting the journey of how he's coming up with bosses. What's sort of his one recent videos, or how he's doing a lot of just kind of like major things that he's getting his community and stuff involved, and be like, hey, what do y'all think? What do y'all like about it? Playing like that. And you like seeing that. You like seeing like the journey of some people,
Hmm.
and you're wishing you have something to kind of root for, wishing to success. But there's also those people that like they see it and they don't see them trying hard enough for some reason, and they don't see them like, oh, why would you do that? That's kind of dumb. And it's like, well, I mean, maybe, maybe not, but I think some people kind of say that phrase a little bit more harsher than others. Like
Yeah.
constructive criticism is something that's really, really hard to come by in some cases, but it's something that's always wanted, but a lot of people don't go that route.
They People don't know the line because it's. I personally don't think it's a thin line, but they don't know the line about like constructive criticism. You can criticize, but you need to do it constructively and stuff like that. A lot of times people just go straight to bashing and they think that's a form of criticism in a good way. And you're like, no, you're just bashing this at this point. Like you're not doing anything that's helpful.
Have you seen instances where somebody they're trying to get constructive criticism, but they're just failing at it?
Yeah, I see it a lot, and because I follow a lot of devs or like even like people who work at Bungie and stuff like that. Because I love like the company, I love like the games they make and everything. And you see a lot of times like there'll be like this one person out there and they'll be like, hey, it's like we know this is going on in the game right now. It's an issue. So this is what we're doing right now, but it's gonna take time to get the patch out. So it's gonna take a couple months, but here's our plan. And then people will like try to talk back into that respond back to that, but they do it in just like a ill way. It's like, oh well, it should be easy. It should be like a switch, and it's like no, that's not helping. Like if you understand that you want it now, everybody wants it now, but
Mhm.
this developer is literally telling you like, hey, here's our plan. We know we're aware of it. This is our game plan to get to where we want to go on this part. But they're being honest about it, and yet people are still complaining about it. And it's like at that point, I felt bad for them. I was like, what? Man, these people are really trying. They're talking to their community. They're out there. You know, even putting themselves out there because then they could just personally get attacked instead of that person just attacking the random like Destiny or Bungie Twitter account, something like that. They're attacking the person's personal account because they're trying to do the right thing and communicate.
I I do kind of hate that. As a side note, just kind of going around and like targeting people directly and stuff, especially for like bigger companies. You're trying to like you're literally going on LinkedIn trying to find the person, and they go on Twitter, and
Yeah,
that's kind of that puts a bad taste in my mouth. But that also brings up another thing when it comes to like criticism and stuff. Do you find to give more slack to indie games more so than AAA?
for me personally, yes and no. It's kind of a hard way to like answer that. Yes, I do, because a lot of times these indie titles only have a very small team that are working on it, so they don't have as much resources to do what they want to do. But at the same time, like they come out with amazing stuff. Like Cuphead is one of those examples where it was a very very small team. What they were doing is something different because everything was literally hand drawn. Every single like frame is hand drawn for that game and everything like that. And then it had the big backing of Microsoft behind it, saying, "Hey, like we want this game, we want to help you make this game," and things like that. And so that kind of get it. If you don't know how the gaming industry works and you're just like a normal person, like sees this game being promoted and stuff like that here and there and stuff like that, you're like, oh, it's like, oh, Microsoft's making this game, so they should have it done. Why is it taking so long? Why is this and that? It's like, no, there's still a small company. It's still the small people making the game. They just are lucky enough to have that backing that a lot of indies don't. And when it comes to the AAA aspect, because I've followed the game industry for so long, just because I love it so much, I've I've learned to understand how hard it is to do those games, like how much money goes into it, and sometimes they do just get it wrong. And when they get it wrong, the best thing you could do is constructively criticize. Kind of, I think treating like AAA games like how we talk about indie games is more of a we should find a middle ground when it comes to the criticisms of it and stuff like that. I think it's starting to get better. There's still a lot of issues and stuff like that in there, of course, because it's the internet, which is the wild west out there. So
Mhm.
you're gonna get bad things no matter what, and just mean people out there and trolls and stuff like that. But yeah. What about yourself?
Um, I I think I do in a sense, right? 'Cause I think you kind of really kind of nailed a lot of it on the head. It's it's more of like how much do you understand what actually going on and stuff. Now, when it comes to a lot of indie stuff, honestly, you probably don't know about it until they come out or that they actually built the hype to its release.
Hmm.
Whatever they is because when it comes to indie games, there's so much you have to do in conjuncture with actually making the game in order for it to be successful, especially if we want to make some money off of it and want to do the next one. There's just so much that has to go into it, and it's a lot of new skills for one person. You can't just there's not always a way that you can hire somebody to do the part that you can't do. At that point, you got to do what you did in high school and be the one guy in the group project who just does all the work, and
Yeah,
you're not going to fail because of someone else. You just sometimes you just got to kind of do that.
I was that guy
um
all the time. What are you doing? I got this.
yeah, but when it comes to like AAA and stuff, it's hard to really kind of give them the same kind of slack a lot of times because you're like, well, they do have the resources, they have the data. The either the studio itself is has some weight to it, or maybe somebody who's running the project, the director at the time, and all that. It's kind of you have a hard time kind of sympathizing a lot of times when they kind of say that they're pushing a game. And I think one of the things that has kind of changed is people their understanding of like, yeah, it's okay to push a game back. It's okay to kind of
Hmm.
so some people are going to be mad, but what's worse, they be mad that the game's not out yet, or be mad that the game that they got wasn't the full game, and B, not the best that it can. Persona 5 was pushed out, and you're like, well,
Yeah,
what did they have to do to Persona 5 to make it a better experience? And to me, I'm like, well, whatever they did, it was fantastic,
yeah,
right? Cyberpunk is another one where it's all like, should they pushed it out more to fix a lot of the stuff that happened, because a lot of bad stuff did happen for it. Old consoles
yeah.
just couldn't play the game. Once I got it for PS5, I mean, I had a pretty good time, honestly. But there were some times where you just kind of literally waved down to your character as he went down to the ground.
Just disappeared.
Yeah. So like, they were under a lot of pressure and a lot of stuff crashed down and everybody had their own conspiracy theories and stuff. That doesn't really happen with
Indie
indie
games.
games too much. Like no one's thinking like, well, maybe he had a breakup that one time and maybe, something happened. They're not trying to dig out your past, but they for a big company they would. And so I think we're kind of getting more to understanding. That's why I said it's like, yeah, I do give indie games some kind of slack as an initial, just because it's just a hard 4 years for an indie game. Still sounds reasonable when it's
Yeah,
like you have to do it with your life there. Um,
I think
it's
Cyberpunk is a perfect example of m- me being lucky enough to be I guess not lucky, but just being a nerd and just loving like the gaming industry and stuff like that.
Mhm,
Where it was a game I wanted to play when it was gonna come. I was like, I'm gonna play this game. I was like, but what platform am I gonna buy it on? Because I want to wait for the reviews to see what gives out the better options and stuff like that. And so
mhm.
when there's this shit gonna come out and the reviews started popping out, I got it on PC because I was like I had my Series X stuff like that, but it didn't have the optimized version that was going to come out with it and stuff like that and everything. I was like, okay. And then like I saw the reports of how bad it was running on the older versions and everything like that. I was like, well, then I'm just going to kind of cut out the middleman and play it on my PC because I know overall the reviews on PC were very, very well. It still had issues, it still had bugs, and I think open world games are one of those things where we need to find a way to maybe make them a little bit smaller because they will help with so many of the glitches because they keep trying to make them bigger and bigger and bigger and freaking bigger.
I,
And
I will I will say that you're pretty correct on that. I think one thing, and maybe I'll ask you this, or what do you think about it? Do you think game devs should be more vulnerable with the audience? And what I mean is, do you think they should share more about the development and stuff? And I don't mean like a like a public statement as some of them do. Some of
yeah,
them just kind of more just they talk about it. Like you see more of the actual developers get on the podcast and maybe talk about it. Or you see, more companies kind of explaining like, yeah, we understand, you want to play the game. We're about this amount, there are just some issues that we're having. The companies have some, things that they have to go through. Would you appreciate kind of that vulnerability of showing the inner works of what's going on versus like what's happening kind of still right now where you don't want stuff to just go out because you're afraid that people just don't understand it or they don't really kind of get it or they don't care, but you still put out something and just to let people know like, hey, it's not coming out on just day, but we'll push it back 3 months.
I think developers should start becoming more open towards their community and stuff like that because with how big social media is and stuff like that, like it needs to be something that you can do. I think the hard part is finding the right way to go about it for your game. Because if it's a big AAA company and stuff like that that's going to do this, like you want to outreach to your community, but at the same time, it's a very broad community. So if you don't do it in the right way, you're just going to get a bunch of backlash for it. As for if it's an indie title and like if it's a Kickstarter game that someone does stuff like that, and like they have to stay in with the community, be like, hey, this is what I'm going on. This is what's going on so far. This is how it's looking. Um, things like that. Because you know, what I mean, you work with the community, and the community is what's going to make the game even hopefully become more of a bigger success once it actually gets published. So I think it's a thing they definitely should do. It's just a matter of you got to find the sweet spot for your game because not every game and every community is the same.
Do you think demos should come back?
I'm not a big fan of demos, and I know that's a very me thing. Like I think demos are a good thing. You get to try out the game, you get to see if you like it and stuff like that, and it's gonna help out a lot for people to make a better decision with their money.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I can also see why game development companies might not want to do that because they kind of want people to just go in blindly and buy this game just because you could possibly get better numbers that way. But
I do remember the conversation around demos of how stressful it was to kind of actually have a playable demo be ready at a certain time. Because I mean, you always want to have stable version of the game. Like games are normally built in an iterative kind of motion. Like you're always building one and adding on top of it, and you're just trying to get to like a stable enough build to where not everything gets destroyed. when you put it in front of somebody and them just their feedback, it's just like, no, it's just bad. You want to try to avoid that as much as possible. I do miss them a little bit. And the reason why I miss them a little bit is because it kind of, I think there's a thing called like content overload. I think YouTube is a very good example of content overload. There's so much on the platform where you have to have, a big algorithm help sort it all, or else there's just no way like you would actually find stuff. And I
Yeah.
think for a lot of the game consoles and stuff, there's so many games that are probably still coming out, both indie and AAA, that you might not know about. Um, Especially because AAA's they can't pay for all that. And if I were to just pull up, and I think I have it pulled up to the side here, allow me to share this screen here. I wanted to show it earlier, but I think we kind of got it here, and kind of want to share. Come on, you can share it.
Come on now.
Share the second one. Tell me if you can see it or not. This is itch.io, and
Yeah.
just, I mean, if I just wanted to play like a game, just try what people are doing, this is a good place to go. But you just look at this first page and you're like, God damn, what's going on here? Like
It reminds me of the webpage HTML games, or
Mhm.
like Newgrounds and stuff like that. When there's a big thing to go through those, it's kind of like that's kind of what it looks like to me right now.
Yeah. But it's like, is this list, this grandiose list of games, missed opportunities of the fun that I'm not having right now, or
Right.
can I even give good time, like to say, you know what, I'm just gonna sit down and play these games from start to finish. I'm just gonna, or I'll give an hour to each one of these and see how they are. That's a lot to ask for personally. I think especially now, I'm a lot older, and it's, even if I had the time, it's the willingness to do it. It's also, I think, a big thing.
Yeah.
But it's one of those, like, this is kind of the reality. This is HIO is not really like a place where, it's published on other platforms. So it's not the same as like, when you go on PS Network or whatever, and they have it nicely organized and fitted. You go on the Xbox store, everything's nice and organized. Steam knows you more than your mother, and a nicely organized stuff. It doesn't have that kind of same kind of flow, but even then, it's like, it's still a lot, and you're still wanting to kind of do stuff, kind of like really putting your time and stuff, but it's hard. It really is. I just kind of wanted to kind of show that, put that out there. It's harder to do it, and sometimes when somebody puts it in a nice little package of like all those types of games to play them, to try them out, you kind of get the taste. Now, unfortunately, some demos back then ruined a game because you got the aesthetic of it, or they put too much. They didn't realize maybe playing the first 3 levels wasn't the best idea. It didn't
beat half the game.
yeah, like it didn't really do you any favors. But fighting games, for sure, like demos are a necessity just to try out the game mechanics.
Yeah.
Multiverses right now, just released a patch, I think this week or last week, on just kind of how like the gameplay is now, and the bigger change with it, and what they got from people playing and all that. That's just making it a better game and stuff. Now it's playing like it's just already out right now at this point, but it's just the fact that they can actually use that feedback and stuff to kind of make the next thing. So I will say that I do miss it a little bit. I do miss having that CD of like Soul Reaper.
Yeah.
That's when I first got introduced to Zone of the Enders, when it was the PS2 demo disc. And
Really?
I was all like, oh, I really like that. That was a good example of a little bit of the game, a little bit of the taste for you to go out there and, go buy it. And I do kind of miss that. I do miss that a little bit, but I was just wondering, because I know a lot of people don't feel like that. I don't think the industry really feels like that. I think it's like you said, going in blind, spontaneous. That's where we get the money. That's where the money gets spent.
I think it's starting to change though, because like you have the new PlayStation subscription, and now they're like asking a lot of their developers when they put games on their things to create demos now. Because like if you do the premium platform, the premium tier on that PlayStation 1, like you get access to like for sure like their first party stuff. You get demos to try out with it before their games come out and stuff like that. And I think they're gonna try and add like third parties to do the same thing and stuff like that. And then you've also had since the pandemic happened and E3 kind of became like a huge mess and stuff like that, since it wasn't couldn't do its thing anymore. Steam now has a thing around like the E3 area time where they have like a whole. You can go to a part of the Steam page, stuff like that, and it's demos and stuff like that that are like, hey, these are like the new things coming out in the near future, and we want to showcase them. So here are the demos for them and stuff like that. So it seems like they're starting to fiddle around, look into demos, and see if it could benefit a lot more. I think the best thing that I've seen work so far is not necessarily demos, but early access for stuff.
True. Yeah, I think early access works out really well. I think demos work more in favor of indie titles, quite honestly, because
Okay.
because I think anybody who's working indie, if you're working on something, you really want to know how people feel about it. That's the only way to make it
Yeah,
better.
true.
I think it's different when there's like when you have project managers and stuff that really put on deadlines and everybody, struggling to kind of do it, and then they might fall versus like, hey, I did an okay build. Can y'all try it out? Let me know. I think the stress is plummeted, honestly, in that kind of aspect.
Yeah.
But it actually gives you a chance to build a community, and that's kind of why I kind of brought it up. It's it works in favor of people that are really trying to get their game to be out, the actually have that extra push to kind of have it keep going to the next step over there, even if they have to do something in between to try and keep the motivation but not get bored. I think when you give like a little part of the game out and people are playing it, they can really help you out, kind of make this whole experience, which kind of gives you motivation. I wish that could translate better to AAA, but I know it's really hard because again, like that vulnerability I was talking about earlier, is there a way for like you, the user, to them, the company, to talk in a way, the way that we're talking now, and be able to kind
Right.
of do that and kind of build a community around their title more like that. And that's really the distance is so far, it's just really hard to collapse it or do too many changes to bring it closer.
I think that's where the whole PlayStation thing is going to be really interesting to watch. See how it grows, see how it changes to. Hopefully, I hope it becomes an actual thing, because I know it's more of a me thing about like not being crazy about demos, but demos do amazing things for people to try out games and stuff like that. And so this seems like they're trying to do something in the right direction. I just hope they stick with it and then just keep evolving it as the years go by to see what works better for. Because maybe their demos for the AAA games, they might have to change their formats for that compared to an indie game or like a third party game that's a little bit smaller, and they could do what they're doing now. You know what I mean? It's gonna be really interesting to see how it grows and change.
Yeah, no, I mean, we can only hope for the best, right? Like we can
Yeah.
only hope that some things that we know are good take off in the same way that are good. I think a lot of what's going to help with that is how much access do they have to that stuff, really. Like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's behind a paywall and stuff, so it kind of has that extra thing of like, oh, would I be watching YouTube videos if I had to pay like $10 a month to do it? Like,
Yeah.
or is there a price point where it's like I just forget that I'm paying for like YouTube Premium? Like I don't even know how much
Yeah.
I'm paying for it, but I forget about it. But I also know that me being a premium member gives more like revenue to the video, because I'm just paying that little bit more and stuff. So I know
Right.
it helps out. So I don't hate it. Plus, it gets rid of ads, and that's kind of, if I can get rid of ads, but also be contribute to the creator at that point, I think I like it the best.
Yeah. Oh man, I just had it in my head. It had something to do kind of similar to demos. Oh, they're not really demos, but how do you feel about how a lot of games will do? They'll give like an early build or like right before the game's about to come out, they'll give them access to a certain amount of the game to influencers and stuff like that. Do you think that's a good working model that should still be going on, or do you think maybe switching to demos might be better.
How do I answer this? It's a perfect example of don't hate the player, hate the game kind of thing. Like, you have to do it. You need
Yeah,
the loudest voices in the community, whether they're antagonistic or very pro your company, to play your game in front of as many people as they can and get people interested. That 30% hype that I keep bringing back to, it's just too important.
yeah,
It's the number one thing. The first thing is, can you get the hype? If you just kind of put it out there, um, it's a shoot and a miss. Because if you think about it, like if I were to have you play a demo today, the only way I could do it is I have to put it on a platform. So it has to be on PlayStation Network. It has to be on Xbox Live. It has to be on Steam, which Steam has their own kind of greenlit thing. They have their own way of like validating, like if people, if this game should come out or not.
right.
So the only other way is to put it on a website and have you download it and do all that, which is not safe. For the game developers, because they're kind of giving you like the game itself to where it could be broken and they might be able to reverse engineer in some kind of aspect.
Hmm.
And it's not safe for you, the user, because if you get a wrong copy of it, then it might do more damage than good. And so putting it on a platform where it can go to a console where it's on something that's more predictable, how the arrows might work, or the worst error is you get booted out of the game. Well, of course, bricking, but
Yeah,
it's hard. Like if it's something bricks, you also have that assurance that someone's gonna, okay, well, sorry, we'll make it right for you. Are you willing to kind of deal with that? And that's really hard in that aspect. I'm not sure if I answered your question on that as for that, but it is very difficult. I guess the best way to kind of say it. It's like,
it's a hard
yeah,
question.
it really is, because it's one of those where it's all like, yeah, like once you get the biggest people to do it, even if your game's mediocre, as long as the hype's there, people will play it. That's what you want. Like I think at the end of the day, you want people playing the game, whether they hate it or love it. For triple A's to exist and for triple A's to make money, you need to blast out the game as far as wide as possible in a way that's going to get people to even try it and then get that core base.
Yeah,
Those people who are going to, especially, I think, and well, I mean, we'll probably get into it now. I'll get into it. We'll get more dive deep into another video and stuff. Free to play. I think that's a video that we should probably hit on. But free to play is that, right? It's like, how
yeah,
can we get so many people to know about it? Because we know getting them into the game is not a big cost on their part, you know. So yeah, having influencers play like an early access game, kind of getting into it. I mean, it like I said, worked for multiverses,
yeah,
getting that game into the hands of Critical and everybody playing Shaggy and showing their clips. It works for a lot of these other people. It's just you can't deny the formula. It's proven. It works.
yeah,
And I think it's so easier to have a company treat an influencer as another company and having a partnership that they can shake on than it
yeah,
is to say like, well, how do we let a few group of people in and kind of do that? So that's kind of my take. And it's just the last thing to kind of hit into it. Only really multiplayer games have some kind of formality of they can do something with little effort and a big return. Like they can allow more people into the early access to kind of do something. You can't do that for a single player.
yeah,
Like you can't really do an early access for a single player and stuff like that. Like I think that's where like I miss where demos really were helpful, but at the same time, I can see why it would hurt them.
yeah. I think influencers is a really good way to go about it now and onward in the future, because when you're the person like me, you're the audience. You're going to the people you like to watch stuff. So if you that usually watch something of an influencer because they kind of have similar tastes to the gameplays you like and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So if that person is playing a game that you think that you're gonna like, and they're like, I don't like this about that, I don't like that about that. It helps me to make a better decision. Like, I might wait for that game, or maybe don't even try it, just because You know what I mean? The similar styles, I see what they're doing, I see what they're talking about, and as I'm watching them play it, it's like, okay, like that doesn't look like it's for me, or that definitely looks like for me. Like that's the jam right there. That's the
Mhm.
mamma jamma.
Now I know we kind of hit on a lot of AAA in the kind of like this last part of the talk, and less, indies. Just so a way to kind of circle it back to indies, because I think a lot of stuff we did talk about really kind of affects indies, and I think anything that we talk about like this, I think it helps even more for indies, like getting influencers play their game and really like if they know that an influencer likes that indie game, then yeah, it's almost guaranteed at that point. But what about the case when you hear that a game was made in Unity, or that you actually hear a game was made in some good game engine? Does that diminish your enthusiasm a little bit? And I'll probably give more context after you answer, but I just kind of want to hear like your initial thoughts on that.
For me, no, because if you're using a platform like Unity and stuff like that, it's a known platform that's there to help you make the game and make it easier for you. So to me, when I see like, oh, made in Unity, it's like there's a better chance of having less glitches because that system is already known to work together. You know what I mean? Because it's been proven. You have people behind it that are working on it, fixing it, updating it all the time, so that developers can come in, use it, and know, hey, if I add this part to this part, it's gonna work because it's all in Unity, and this is like the engine is running off of and stuff like that. So when I see like a sign like Unity and stuff like that or Unreal, it's like it kind of brings like, okay, cool, like this has a possibility to be a good game compared to someone to trying to build their own engine brand new and stuff like that, because that alone is just as hard as making the game. You know what I mean? Like you gotta, if you're building your own engine and then you're building the game in the engine, you know what I mean? Like so many things can go wrong because you had to use so much time and resources for the engine and then you
Mhm.
switched it to that. So I it brings me like a good, like a sigh of relief, like, okay, cool, this is made in Unity, I'm down. This is made in Unreal, I'm
Mhm.
down.
And the reason why I said I probably give a little bit more context after your answer, because it's for a big time when some games were made in Unity. It was actually because some people kind of simulated with it would have some bugs because of just how some indie games were were when they were made with Unity. There were just some things that they were very polished, and some things the wonkiness of the game engine kind of made it do some silly things. But also, I think the whole reuse of assets and asset flipping and stuff is what really kind of came in the part of that. But I think one of the things what I see about that, Unreal doesn't really have that kind of same annotation with it. And actually, one of the places I like going to is actually Reddit for those kind of game engines. And kind of what I was trying to bring up right now was this is like the Unreal Engine Reddit. And one of the things that kind of like going in here is actually seeing like people's projects, kind of them just kind of doing something. And I think this little thing in itself is fantastic. Little setup of something, somebody doing something and stuff, and then kind of going down the street of just seeing people like kind of make up this game. It's just like I know nothing about this game, but it's hard for me to kind of see this as something that somebody's just making on their own time and stuff. It looked really nice.
Yeah,
And like you said, for like Unity, I think the same for Unity is kind of like that too. Is say a Unity Reddit. Let's see kind of what we kind of get in that 3D showcase. And I think one of the things that I kind of yeah, this is good. Yeah, that should be it though. Just seeing how people are trying out their ideas and sharing it. Like I think this is really cool and kind of just brings a little bit more, especially when people do stuff like this of adding different kind of looks to it and stuff like that. And I should probably make it bigger so I can actually see it. Like I said, you don't know anything about this, but you're just seeing it and it looks cool. It looks
yeah,
like
definitely. I didn't know about this. This is really cool.
yeah, so it's just like I'm just seeing a part of it, and it's like I don't know what's happening, but it looks cool.
Yeah,
Um, so I think once you maybe for me, like since I've tried to do stuff with both engines, I'm a little bit more like if you do it all for you, like I'm not gonna shame you at all. Um, But there are some, I think, when I feel like the game is the carbon copy, I might kind of back off with it. Have you played Tunic?
I haven't. I want to.
But you
It's
heard
like a game
about it,
sounds like it's
right?
right up my Sounds like it's
Yeah.
right up my alley.
I shied away from it because I thought it was just somebody's version of The Legend of Zelda, but as a furry. Like that was my first thought to it, right? So like it's a bad take, I know, but that's kind of where like my mind kind of went. But then when people are all like, "Oh, but it's like that," but if you were playing Dark Souls in that same aspect, and you're like, "Wait,"
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, like the game feeds you absolutely nothing. And you have to really truly explore everything in order to really kind of get some really good stuff. And sometimes you'll be doing something in the game where like you went all around to kind of do this one thing, but if you were to just went this one direction that wasn't as obvious, you probably could have skipped a lot of it. Like there's just a lot about the game that was like big surprises with it that good example, just don't judge a book by its cover. Sometimes it's just,
yeah.
but it's hard for me to kind of get over that, right? Like if a
Not all
game,
furries are bad.
yeah, well, but if you were to say like if there was a game with like lightsabers and stuff, you would probably think about Star Wars and like, well, how is it better than Star Wars or what is that? But it could also be dope, like Beat Saber. Like,
Yeah,
it's all like a rhythm game with lightsabers, and it's like, oh, okay, that was actually pretty cool. And then I actually liked that game when I got to play it and stuff, and almost made me get Oculus Rift for it. Almost, but that money's
surprised you don't
still a
have
thing.
one.
Money's still a thing, and I was always back to forth because I was like, should I get the PlayStation one because I'm gonna have a PlayStation and I think it's relevant? Try to get the Facebook one and finally give Facebook some money, which kind of hurts a little bit. Or should I be like, no, I think if I'm gonna do 3D anything, I need a Vive. Like I need to put some real money behind it. Like,
Got you.
and once you kind of go through that circle, you kind of just like, I'll give up for now. I'll think about it later.
Yeah, the VR rabbit hole gets really expensive really fast.
Mm-hmm. And I think VR games are pretty fun. I think what they try to do with them, I think is only going to evolve more. I don't think we'll ever be Ready Player One type of gaming or Sword Art Online type of gaming, but
Yeah,
I think it's a niche that I'm glad still hasn't died out entirely yet.
I don't know.
I think it's
VR chat's pretty close to that, right? No, I'm just kidding.
please try to actually do something with your hands in those games and not look like the most awkward thing. Like, what is my hand doing? My hand doesn't work like this in real life. Make it look like you half drunk on something.
I came into this chat drunk.
Yeah. Or I'm not sure if you saw like there was like an indie game like that of Attack on Titan of you trying to like shoot out and all that kind of jazz, right? And it's like, oh, it's nice because you have like the perspective or whatever, like you're kind of flying around. But what breaks the immersion is you're not really feeling it, right? Like you're just seeing it. It might kind of mess with your head a little bit, but you're not actually feeling like you're zipping and gliding throughout all the place, and kind of cheapens kind of like the experience that your brain wants to have.
Yeah, sorry, my dog is a little barking, so I didn't want to coming in.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Dogs be
But
dogs.
yeah, but I was definitely listening and everything, and yeah, I agree. I want to get into VR, but I still think it's very niche for me at the moment. So I'm at a wait and see aspect of it, which I think is a good thing to do. Because there's definitely there. Like I would love to play Beat Saber, but I don't want to spend the money to just play Beat Saber and then maybe dabble in a few other games, and that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at too. Is I will literally, I mean, and I know in the last podcast I said like I bought the Xbox 360 Elite for one game, but it was an RPG, so I knew I was going to get some time out of it.
Yeah,
And I ended up playing more stuff after that, but I don't have the same guarantee with VR gaming.
yeah,
It's like, and unfortunately, I don't have the same enthusiasm of just owning all of it and being like, I'll just get everything and then it won't matter what I get. Because quite honestly, it's like I'm having a hard time justifying one and not think it's a waste of money.
yeah. I think that is one thing that can be a down or is slightly a downfall in the indie industry in general, which also kind of works in VR because VR is starting to kind of become like that, is
Mhm.
that the marketplace and the games that are coming out is just there's so vast of them, so it's starting to become hard as to like which is like the fun good game and not just like some copy of another thing, a repaste of another game and stuff like that. And so like that's the market's really flooded with stuff like that. And from what I've seen from like stuff that people talk about VR and stuff like that, like there's a lot of those type of games out there. And so it's like I'm that's not what people are looking for in VR at the moment, but at the same time that's kind of where the technology is at because it's still so new, fresh, and it takes a lot to do with them and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree. I think some of the most funniest projects will be indie games when it comes to
Yeah.
VR stuff. And I think indie is one of the things that's kind of carrying VR.
Yeah.
Like, if it wasn't for indie games, I think the VR would have died just like the Virtual Boy did. And I think some of this is the funny things I see people like. If you haven't watched Danny's video, some of the stuff that he made, it's just straight up hilarious when like he was trying to do like a 3D game. It's pretty funny.
Really.
Yeah, I'll send you a link later, but it's just funny when you kind of see like stuff like that happen and stuff. But I mean, it's another thing that was really nice. What's another thing? I know there was something else on indie games that we were gonna touch, but I know we kind of got away from it. But what are things kind of, I guess we could say kind of like as a final thought, what are the kind of things that you are looking for now in indie games and kind of what you want more indie developers to kind of do in order for you to kind of really see their projects or to kind of get more involved?
I think for me now it's just finding the thing that makes your game fun and just go hard in that aspect and stuff like that because it could be something very simple and stuff like that. Like I said, Loop Hero was one of those games where it's very simple. The aspect of the gameplay is very simple, and then the developer added like other things on top of it to make it more complex. But the initial structure of the game, the main point of the game, was simple, fun, and then since it was so fun to play, I was like, cool, I'm into this. I'm gonna be here for this. I'm gonna enjoy it the entire time. You know what I mean? Same thing with Undertale. It's the initial point of that game is what makes it fun, and then you add the overall story, the different endings you can get, and stuff like that that are added on that make it like to me like become a phenomenal game. But it's the gameplay itself for indies is what gets me attracted to it. It's like get your gameplay down, make sure it's fun to play, and it can kind of give you those endorphins to keep wanting to go move along or keep replaying it in some way. And that's where it gets me hooked in, and I go full in on it. What about yourself?
I want to carbon copy your answer, almost verbatim because gameplay is key. I think it's more of the core gameplay needs to be tight as hell. Like it can't, you know, everything else extra on top of it could be whatever just to kind of give it a meme to it. But the core gameplay itself just needs to be tight. And like you said, yeah, fun I think is an easy way, but it's hard to define fun. Like what's fun for you is really subjective. It's never an objective thing.
True.
But having it's you can't say it without having that in the sentence. The game has to be fun, and the fun comes from like the gameplay itself. What did you do to make it fun? Um, so as much as I don't really want to like copy that, verbatim, it's kind of hard to say. Like, yeah, story's nice, and I'm a guy who likes story. I want to know why the characters are doing a thing, but I also care about doing that thing too. And if you're not going to do a story, the gameplay needs to be everything. Like, I like Fall Guys. I this week Laura tried Fall Guys,
Ooh,
and I knew she would have liked it.
yeah.
Once she actually saw it, and I played around first, she saw it and she was comfortable enough to play it because all it is run that way. It's
Yeah.
all like, don't
Jump,
touch anything because that would be
jump
the
on that thing.
yeah, like, but it was fun for her, and I knew it was fun when she wanted to try it again.
That's
And
awesome.
that's one of those things where it's like the core gameplay matters, not the fact that I can throw the Assassin's Creed outfit on, which I will do one day. I will pay that money.
I'm surprised you haven't already.
I guess you could say I'm a little, even with multiverse, I wanted to throw down $100 for like the founder stuff. But
Yeah.
I mean, you get it's $100, 30 characters. It's not the value was there. If they would have sold me the game like that day one, I definitely would have bought it. Right.
Right.
But I'm also like that. I played it enough where I might be dying down, and right now my right arm or left arm was having the most hardest time moving. I think it was really constricted after playing. I'm like, damn, how much have I been playing? Outside of just my thumb really hurting, but once you get core gameplay down and then you're exposing that for people to play, I think those are kind of going to be the major things that will get you to anybody to play almost any indie game. Once you got that,
Yeah.
it's fine. But I also say that even if that's not the tightest, I mean, yeah, it might not be the most successful way to go about it, but I'm also just more happy as people finishing their games and finishing
Yeah.
those personal
Definitely.
milestones and stuff. Because I think that's what helps you start on the next project. Like I said, much as I haven't really put out a lot of indie games and stuff, that doesn't mean I'm not trying stuff in Unity, Unreal here and there, because I know I'm getting better every time that I try it. And hopefully one day that those projects that I even had in Innova when we were doing it might come to fruition one day and stuff. So that's all. That's all I kind of say on that. Is that kind of final note is core. Like you said, gameplay. Gameplay is king still.
Yeah. Definitely.
Well, I do it. Hopefully, in the future, that we can actually talk to more game devs, because I know we kind of said it in kind of different viewpoints. But what I do hope that in this podcast, after a few episodes, we can actually bring on some game devs and actually talk to them about the experience, because I think it is
That'd
really
be awesome.
important, and I do feel that some vulnerability does need to be introduced. If we are going to jump into more inclusive thoughts, if we're going to do more mental health stuff like that and kind of spread that around, we should also give a platform for people to kind of to express kind of the things that happen and not wait till somebody does a big documentary about it, or we all
Yeah.
found out that X company has been doing blah blah blah.
Right.
I do hope that we get to have those kind of conversations in this podcast.
I would actually be interested in like um trying to get like possibly QA type of people as well to express their things, because like QA is like one of the from what I've seen is like one of the most important things when it comes to getting a game out and stuff like that. And for bigger AAA games, they usually some companies don't want to resource out it as much in it and give them limited times and stuff like that to do the Q&A stuff. And that's usually the areas where they find a lot of the bugs and issues, and let the developers know so that way they can work on fixing those errors and stuff like that before their game is shipped out. And so it'd be really interesting to get like some Q&A people's point of views and stuff like that. See how like their job goes and stuff like that.
I think in an outside opinion, I think that's true. I think QA is probably not as appreciated, but that's a real hard conversation again to get into. And that is something I rather would have somebody who's been doing QA for a while come in and give their opinions and really kind of educate us on what it is to in case of like other people's viewpoint, how do I get a job of playing video games for a living? Because that's kind of what people how they see it. They don't see like yeah, you're not just playing video games. There's a lot of intricate things that get done, and they're very important to a game's sink or fail factor. So I do hope like one day we can actually have that conversation.
Okay, that'd be awesome. Anybody be all know out there? Message us. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, no, I know you're out there. But with that being said, I think that's probably a good point to kind of like put a pin on it for this episode. I think I know we kind of get into like kind of pulling in AAA into a lot of the conversation, but I do feel like it was pretty important for that second half. So I know kind of glad we were able to kind of share some opinions and kind of get more into it. And I kind of hope that we kind of get to get on more of that, or kind of be able to talk about that. We probably will talk about this topic again. I think it's a good topic once that the landscape has changed a little bit. I think we'll definitely talk about it again.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting once like like especially PlayStation's new service is like big and up and coming. Not up and coming, but it has its feet in place and stuff like that. It's going to really be interesting what it'll do for indie titles as well. Now that PlayStation will have a better format to try and get stuff like that out there for people to be. It's behind a paywall, but you're not technically paying for the game. You're just in the paywall and it's in there, so they have to actually go, well, I can try this. It's going to be nice to see another platform have that aspect and play Cult of the Lamb. Everybody.
Yeah. I'll try to get to it, man. I like I promise.
We need Steam Decks.
Oh, don't get me started. I will think about it one day, but once they're actually available and I can pay for it.
Yeah.
But with that being said, everybody, thank you for joining us for this episode. If you're watching this later on, we're going to be doing shows every Friday at 7:00 Central Time. So don't be a stranger. Join us both on Twitch and on YouTube. Mainly, we'll go live on both platforms, but I think our main live platform would be Twitch. And if you don't catch the episode, we would also be posting this on both platforms, and we are posting highlights of our pretty much live streams now too, in case you can't spend 2 hours with us.
Yeah,
giving us 5 to 10 minutes of your time is very much appreciated, and we do thank you for the people who are live right now who got the chance to kind of be within the conversation.
Super awesome.
Leave a comment down below. If you are watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and kind of be with us on the next episode. But until then, my name is DuShaun Williams.
I'm Chris. Peace out.
And we'll be it. That's you kind of said it before me. We're out.